Welcome to Healthcare Simplified, a podcast from DeliverHealth. Nothing's inherently simple about healthcare. That's why on Healthcare Simplified, we explore with today's top health leaders how to maximize ROI, staff satisfaction, and public health outcomes by building greater efficiencies into the healthcare connections that matter most between clinicians and technology, providers and patients, and people and their health. I'm your host, Mitch Holdick. Let's put simplicity to work together. Welcome back to Healthcare Simplified, episode number 7. I am Dan Lavelle, head of marketing here at DeliverHealth, and I'm super excited about today's topic and, more importantly, our location. This is our first on-site, in-person, which is rare these days, podcast recording from our DeliverHealth Customer Experience Center, also called CXC, here in sunny Clearwater, Florida. Where we now call home here at DeliverHealth, and we're so glad that we could have you join us. I'm also thrilled to be joined today by our partners from KLAS Research, Boyter and Eric Manley, who came all the way in from Salt Lake City here with me today. Mac, Eric, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. It wasn't a huge ask. I mean, to come from November in Utah to Florida, yeah, we're happy to do so.
and then we'll go back to Salt Lake for those that like to ski. We've just got a perfect situation between this partnership here.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Eric, I want to start with you. Just for those who are listening to this podcast who aren't familiar with KLAS, give us a little bit of background on who KLAS is and the role you play here in the healthcare market.
Yeah, so my name is Eric Manley, Client Success Manager for KLAS Research. I've been with KLAS Research for 1 year, since September of last year. KLAS Research is an independent research firm that works primarily very focused on healthcare itself. We work very closely with vendor organizations like DeliverHealth, all the way from big EMRs to Epic to small telehealth platforms or everything in between, from revenue cycle to pop health and everything in between. We talk to provider companies that work very closely with these big vendor companies, and we gather research, we talk to them about their experience with these vendors, and then it's completely anonymous. We give it back to the vendors to help them to improve their products, as well as giving it to providers to help them to make informed decisions and helping to drive the market forward towards a better future. So in that way, I kind of like to think of it as almost like a Yelp for the healthcare IT industry.
I love it. And so much of these podcasts that we've done with partners have really been about putting a thumb on the pulse of what's happening in healthcare, the voice of the customer. We've heard from folks like Gene Hitchcock, marketing side. We've heard from Dr. Azizi Sykes from University of Miami and the Media Innovation Lab, talking about just what's going on, innovations in healthcare. One of the reasons I'm so excited to chat with you both today is because KLAS recently released in their sort of disruptive new solutions category, top 20 emerging solutions in healthcare and digital health report. That I want you guys to talk about why do that report, what you learned from the report. So Mac, I'll start with you. Can you just kind of give us the why behind this new report that you all have generated?
Absolutely. So providers are obviously coming to KLAS. We do, as Eric mentioned, last year, I think we conducted about 25,000 live interviews with provider organizations, large and small, primarily managers, vice presidents of revenue cycle, up to the C-suite, CMIOs, et cetera. And those folks come to KLAS for data. The problem historically has been that by the time KLAS is able to have enough data to share in our traditional reporting, what we call our best-in-class categories, et cetera, by that point, the segments are really mature. So we have enough vendors and enough live clients for each one of those vendors to have one of those market segments. So the feedback we received from the marketplace was, how can KLAS help us as we're evaluating or looking at or assessing some of these emerging technologies or emerging solutions? And as a response to that, we built what we call our Spotlight or First Look reports. These are designed to be very brief in nature, usually 1 to 3 pages, and they're focused on a single vendor, a single solution, the goal of which is to validate the reality of the solution and to try to help the marketplace understand where that is going. So out of that process, we've done now well over 200 of these reports in the last year and a half or so. And the next step or the next evolution of that reporting, again, from our provider partners and friends and advisors, was to say, hey, where is the marketplace going? And amongst all these reports, how can we make good decisions about those organizations or those solutions that are applicable to the quadruple aim of healthcare? So we started this last year, what we call our top 20 awards around emerging technologies. And the goal of that was to aggregate from all of the reports we had done, those reports that had scored an 85 or higher. We took those reports and then we gave that to a group of advisory council effectively. So these are C-suite executives, healthcare providers, and they went through and they assessed these outside of KLAS. So KLAS did not have any thumb on the scale, so to speak, in that regard. Our goal, of course, is always to be impartial. And they assessed it based upon its applicability towards the quadruple aim of healthcare. And this is actually where DeliverHealth scored very well. So based on that report, DeliverHealth won the #1 solution for the patient, improving the patient experience category, and then also #4 for improving the clinician experience. We actually rated all the way through the top 10 for each one of those segments. So won #6 for improving the outcomes and tied at #9 for reducing the cost of care. So the goal for us is simply to share with the marketplace this information, and obviously to see DeliverHealth winning in multiple categories was rare. It was I think we only had one other that even scored in the top 10 in more than one category. So appreciate the work that DeliverHealth is doing, and we are glad to be able to try to articulate that to the market through these reports.
Awesome. Well, we're so appreciative of the recognition from KLAS, but I think it's also, as we've spun up the company and focused on documentation, on coding, on digital health, it's been a great opportunity to tie all of this together. So seeing that we are improving the patient experience, improving the clinician experience, but then ultimately putting that together to go make healthcare better, simpler has been great. But put kind of DeliverHealth aside for a minute, right? Can you just talk about within the categories, there's sort of improving outcomes, reducing cost of care, improving patient experience, improving clinician experience. Can we just talk a little bit about what sort of dynamics you're seeing in each of these? Because I think for those listening, the quadruple aim of healthcare has been sort of out there as a North Star for quite a long time. And I'm just curious what you're seeing in each of these. So maybe talk a little bit about that improving outcomes category. What did that category look like? What's really the insight that you're seeing from that improving outcomes category and the players in it?
So we obviously have so many providers that come to us, and we've talked about this before, Dan, and I think it's absolutely essential. Healthcare is such a unique area. People that go into healthcare want to deliver quality, value, and care to our fellow, human beings. And this is something that's really unique about healthcare and the people that it attracts and the people that thrive within it. So how do we support those people, and how do we support not only in improving that patient outcome, but improving the clinician's experience? Because this is something that is so top of mind, coming again as we are through the pandemic, the global pandemic affecting these healthcare professionals specifically, really in an outsized way. I mean, we all felt the impacts of the pandemic on personal levels, on professional levels, et cetera. But our healthcare colleagues and friends, these are the folks that really have been the point of the spear. And so finding solutions and sharing different technological solutions or service-based solutions that would help to ameliorate some of the burden on them is something that is so top of mind, not just for the providers themselves, but I think for all of us within the wider world to say, how can we help support these, our friends, neighbors, nurses, clinicians, people who work throughout healthcare, how can we do that? And this is one of those areas that we focused on for that report. It was important to kind of highlight that.
And then, Eric, a question to you. I mean, that's on the clinician side, it's really about reducing burnout, improving clinician efficiency. So as Max said, they can do what they were trained to do, which is save lives and create a healthier population, right? That's what we all want. Thank you, Mac. That's really helpful. On the other side of that equation is the patient side. Can you talk a little bit about that improving patient experience category? Who are the players in that category, and where globally does KLAS see the patient experience ecosystem evolving in the future?
So we had a couple of different, very diverse companies and organizations that we assessed. Health Talk AI, MD Save was one that was quite interesting, actually. So they do almost like a Groupon for healthcare, where you can go in, you can shop services, you can shop like a colonoscopy, and you can see what the cost will be, which obviously drives to the heart of price transparency, which is a massive initiative right now. And providers are looking both to deliver on that. Governmental regulatory sources are pushing hard to try to help organizations understand how can we have price transparency and clarity around that, cost estimation, et cetera. So MD-Save did some really interesting things there, and we were able to validate that. Fox Health was another one that provided, so that you can see kind of some of the diversity of how do we improve the patient experience. It's not a single thing. There are so many different aspects of delivering additional value around that. And there's a lot of conflation too with other organizations that, yes, they may provide some aspect of that, but some of these organizations may only provide a very limited scope. So being able to tie all of that together, it's one thing that KLAS is trying to do to try to articulate these market segments in these areas, but also to highlight those best of breed that focus on specific aspects of that. So there's lots of different ways to approach improving the patient experience. Yeah. And these are just a couple of those that we highlighted.
Can you talk a little bit about, for our listeners, within these categories and within the quadruple aim, and those that did well, are they software companies? Mm-hmm. Are they services companies? Are they software and service? And how do you see that ecosystem of software and services companies sort of coming together here?
It's a real mix. Absolutely. It's a great question. I think that definitely more of these tended to be software centric with ancillary or supporting services, but it was generally the focus of the report was really about just the outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so how we achieve those outcomes could be bipartite. It could be both. I do think that with a lot of the companies that we had on here, and DeliverHealth is obviously one of those, they provide both the technological, but then they need to have that human element to really either implement, assess, because that phase of assessment and then delivery is just as important. Mm-hmm. We've done some research at KLAS that shows that implementations, go lives, can be one of the most, if not the most important determination of client satisfaction, patient satisfaction, longitudinally. We have robust data that shows this across, whether it's an implementation of an EHR, whether it's an implementation of an ambient speech solution or anything else. The implementation is absolutely critical. And if it doesn't go well, it causes ripple effects. And those cracks, so to speak, in the foundation may not even be noticeable for years to come if the training or efficacy, et cetera, is not there. Making sure that it's done properly from go absolutely makes a difference in the experience for the provider and for the patients concordantly.
And it's still healthcare. And healthcare is still delivered by humans and received by humans, right? We're a human-powered vertical. And maybe you could just talk about, how much of this is about automating what we can automate to leave time for the human connections that matter the most? How much of that sort of dynamic of automation are you seeing start to come out in this report?
So again, we call this our e-tech report, but that's a bit of a misnomer because to your point, and this is absolutely salient, the fact is that without humans to create these situations to provide the functionality, we're really missing the mark. And something that providers have said for years and years, there's a real perception of technology as a magic bullet that's going to solve the problems that are facing healthcare. And we've seen that time and time again that yes, it can do some. And yes, it can have efficacy. But again, to your point, Greg, excellent point, Dan, if the human element is not there, and if the implementation, the delivery, et cetera, the training functionality of that, it's not there, it's not going to deliver what it needs. Mm-hmm. And we see this with other areas like RPA and autonomous coding, which we have talked about before. These are all things that, yes, can take you to a certain point, but there is always going to be a need for that human interaction, no question.
Yeah. On the other side of the coin, everybody recognizes that staffing is a problem. That vendors and providers alike are having problems with staffing. So we recognize the need for greater and stronger technology and a greater and stronger presence of technology in the industry.
So I want to switch gears maybe just a moment, because I think one of the important discussions that we have and that I see when we talk to DeliverHealth customers and partners is this whole movement to ecosystems. And we hear customers asking us all the time for one hand to hold, right? The opposite is one throat to choke, but we'll focus on the positive side of that of, working with less vendors who can bring more capabilities. And we were talking about this offline before we got into the podcast of, it's really hard to pinpoint one vendor that can do everything. But then the answer is also not the opposite, which is 90 individual vendors to do 90-point solutions. How much are you all hearing about this movement to not just digital ecosystems, but one hand to hold more of a platform approach to the future of healthcare?
Mm-hmm. Consolidation is very top of mind for providers. We talked to lots and lots of providers. I think over the last 2 weeks, I've talked to 3 providers who have specifically brought up consolidation of their platforms. And it's always very, very top of mind. They, like you said, they want one hand to hold. What we're hearing is that, there are a lot of vendor companies out there that are trying very hard to be that one hand to hold. There are very few that can actually do it well. And that's where the best of breeds come in. To your point, the answer is not one vendor just yet. Right. The answer also isn't 90 vendors, but the answer might be right now 20 to 30 vendors.
Sure.
I love the phrase. I appreciate what Eric said there, but Dan, I'm going to quote you, the Goldilocks zone, which I thought was an absolutely appropriate way to describe this, where it's not necessarily one, and it's certainly not you talk with most CFOs of large health systems, and we're talking about anywhere from dozens to potentially hundreds of revenue cycle organizations that they engage with, primarily when they get that invoice, right? They get their invoice process and they have to go through and pay those disbursements. So they clearly want that grouping. They want that consolidation. That said, just like Eric brought up, and it's absolutely true, when we talk with those providers that are utilizing some of these solutions that claim to either provide most or if not all of their outsourced, specifically revenue cycle areas, they're just not getting the value that they want. They get certain value in certain data points or in certain departments or certain aspects, but it's not quite where they would like it to be. And this, again, I don't know that we'll ever really be able to ameliorate that entirely because of the very nature of these health systems. I mean, you've got a large IDN may have 2 to 3 EHRs, and they have an ambulatory group that they acquired or that they're trying to integrate. They have 2 or 3 different CDI solutions. They've got multiple outsourced coding solutions that they're engaging with, and then they've got auditing firms that audit the auditors. And so you've got so much redundancy and layers of overlap that it's really difficult to have that. Now, certainly, again, the goal is to have some organization come in and say, okay, let us help you assess the needs of your organization. Let us assess the opportunities, and then let's identify those best of breed or other organizations that may help you plug in to solve these things that you're looking to solve for. But to try to say that there's one size fits all is not going to work.
And I would imagine for healthcare to be successful, we need to have vendors that can do a thing really well and show return, but then there also needs to be another level of collaboration among vendors that doesn't really exist today. We've been really intentional about focusing on documentation, on coding, and on digital health. But what's common across those is, from a documentation perspective, yes, we have a single mobile application framework. We offer transcription and scribing and language access. But if you're using another vendor for front-end speech, we want to go plug it in, right? Because our focus is in making the clinicians' lives simpler. Coding is really a best of breed approach where we're working with the Fathoms and the NIMS of the world, which is great because they do a thing really, really well with a specific workflow. We want to be that integration engine that ultimately makes it easier for the coder on the client side. And digital is the same thing on a mobile application. There's 800 point solution digital companies out there, which is great. They all do something very, very well, but ultimately we want to be the one that consolidates that. So to the patient, it's easy. So it's great to hear we're on the right track, number one. And I also think that's a call to arms to any partners or vendors out there listening, that it's time to work together to make clinicians and patients' lives easier.
Oh, yeah.
And it's definitely what the providers want. They're asking for it. They're clamoring for it. So yeah, absolutely.
Ever since coronavirus hit and physician burnout, it really highlighted the needs around physician burnout. To your point, there's nothing more important than, in terms of helping patients in the end goal, than helping physicians to not feel burnt out, to feel like they are doing their jobs, to feel like they're appreciated, and to feel like they are doing well, and then, inflaming that passion as much as possible. And I think that when vendors are fighting each other for their spots rather than integrating, to your point, it causes that burnout to get even worse. So
one of the things, maybe just to continue bantering about this, is all of that is true, right? We should be able to simplify each of the various elements to make a clinician's lives easier, to make a patient's lives easier. For some CIOs, CMIOs, folks that lead security and compliance, that also freaks them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how much is this idea of security, data governance, compliance top of mind for you all? And what do you all hear in terms of where that ranks in the priority order for customers?
This is a massive, massive issue. And I think the pandemic moved the needle a little bit in terms of the focus on cybersecurity preparedness. And what is your breach plan? What are your processes in place? We at KLAS began in 2020 what we call our cybersecurity assessment. So we partner with a firm called Sensinet. And the goal there is not to do anything more or less than try to help provide just a little extra validation for these organizations and to say with vendor partners, et cetera, they do have a breach plan. They do have these processes in place. What is their high trust certification, et cetera? So we're doing things around that. And that, again, to your point, Dan, came exactly out of our advisory board saying, this is something providers need to know about. They're paying for cost assessments on every implementation, every process they bring in. What can we do to maybe economize that effort? And it is so important. Days don't go by that we don't hear about some hospital getting a ransomware attack. I mean, we're talking about people, and not to put a fine point on it, but the reality is when this happens in fintech or in banking or other things, it's certainly a tragedy and it's difficulty and so on. But when you hear about a hospital in Texas whose medical records are effectively being sequestered or potentially held for ransom for release, these are people's lives. These are people literally being impacted by that, as well as the fiduciary impact, which is substantial. So it's very, very important. And finding a team that can help you to navigate that process is just as important. And again, this is one of the issues when you have so many different vendors with so many different certifications, and some of them are SOC 2 and some of them are not, and some of them use these protocols, some of them don't. I'm looking at your desk right now. You've got a lightning adapter, right, for your iPhone, which is great because it'll plug in your iPhone, it'll plug in your AirPods, it'll plug in other things. That ubiquity and that universality is a value. And we just don't see that, unfortunately, with healthcare, particularly cybersecurity. And that's not healthcare's fault necessarily. It's just, this is a wider conversation in the digital world, the data governance, the management of data, the protection of that beyond just the need for HIPAA protections. We've got to look at how is cybersecurity impacting all of that. It's very important.
Yes. As far as priority is concerned, cybersecurity is right up there with patient experience. There's a report that we recently put out, and I apologize, I'll have to look it up after, exactly what the name of that report is, but it describes what is top of mind for providers. Why, where is the buying energy? And for providers, the top of mind is patient experience and security. To your earlier point, and to Mac's earlier point, security is very top of mind for providers and making sure that they are protected.
It's a great reminder of it can't be either or, right? To be successful in the future of healthcare, we have to have the ability to leverage data to drive clinician efficiency, to optimize the revenue cycle, to engage patients on their own device, on their own time. But all of that comes with an accountability to manage the data, do what's right for customers, create resiliency, and manage that because the trade-offs are too severe. Right? So it's a great reminder. One of the things that I want to ask you, and there's a lot of headwinds in the economy right now. There's a lot of things that you could look at on the World Wide Web and get a little downtrodden about. But we talk a lot about just optimism for what the future of healthcare is. And we take an accountability to roll up our sleeves every day here at DeliverHealth and work with customers to move forward to simplify the complexities, whatever that means. And we're very optimistic, given everything that we could be pessimistic about, we put that aside and really focus on the future of delivery. So I want you guys, full candor, full transparency. What are the two things that each of you get the most excited about around the future of healthcare?
What I've been hearing a lot about is there's a lot of energy around creating an all-encompassing experience. Like we were talking about earlier, consolidation is extremely important, very top of mind for a lot of providers. I think that where there is so much energy around that and so many vendors focusing on it, I think that I'm most excited for something like that to come out, for something like that to, that covers all areas of the revenue cycle, that really covers the whole thing, a true digital front door, as it were.
Dan, I am extremely optimistic about how healthcare is going. I sincerely, coming through the pandemic, I think if anything, the silver lining, as it were, of that awful experience for all of us that was a shared experience is the refocusing within the wider economy and within the wider population, the importance of robust, quality, valuable healthcare that can really help, because it affects all of us. And we all understand that tangentially, but I think the pandemic really thrust that right into public consciousness, certainly brought it top of mind for regulators and for governmental resources, et cetera. So I'm very optimistic that one of the, again, byproducts of the pandemic was to elevate to the consciousness of most folks the importance of healthcare in all of our lives and the importance of focusing on having really good solutions. I'm really thrilled about the options around automation. This is something that is absolutely essential. And I think we've seen the great resignation, as it's been termed, throughout the wider economy. Certainly healthcare has not been spared from that. In point of fact, I think it's almost worse within certain sectors of healthcare, as we've seen burnout, both for clinician level burnout, but then for nursing fragility is an absolutely massive, massive problem. And we've got these point of care delivery folks, but then you've also got, when we talk with business offices of healthcare organizations, et cetera, they can't find people. And when they do find people, they're people that are maybe not as qualified or take a lot longer to bring up to speed. And then we see vendor organizations struggling with coding and other issues. And so staffing, as Eric brought up earlier, is probably the top of mind issue alongside, Dan, to your point, all these other inflationary pressures and revenue decreases and so on. So you've got all these pressures at the same time, but pressures, to use that euphemism, can produce incredible things.
Yeah.
It's pressure and heat that turns coal into diamonds. And I think that there's an opportunity here to come out stronger, to utilize and find technological solutions, again, to your point, coupled with the human element, to really deliver a better quality of healthcare, better outcomes, and improve the clinician experience. And again, that's where we appreciate DeliverHealth and what you're doing. That's one of the reasons we were happy to be able to feature you in that report and in our ongoing reporting.
Awesome. And we'll link at the bottom of the podcast, a link to download that report so anyone who's listening in today can download it. And one last question, hard-hitting question. What do you think about our new Customer Experience Center for those listening who aren't here in person?
I think it's awesome. It's truly, truly wonderful. I was very impressed as we came in. I realized that there was a lot of care put into creating an experience for visitors, for visiting providers and otherwise. And, everything, like all the little details are there for creating an experience. And I thought that was very impressive to me.
Yeah, we joked about this before, but Dan, you shared with me, a couple of years ago, the plans for the center and what it would look like, and seeing it in person and actually being able to see how you crafted things so that it's flexible. It's a flexible space. It's a space that is very comfortable and allows for people to come in and share ideas and do those things. But what I was most impressed by are the people that are here and the people that we've been able to meet. The center is fantastic. But to your point, which I think was such a great point, the structure and the infrastructure is here. It's the people that make it really an incredible place.
Mm-hmm. We can't end on a better note than that, Mac. Eric, I want to thank you so much for joining me. We'll call that a wrap on Healthcare Simplified episode number 7. Thank you all so much for listening in today, and we will see you on the next podcast. Eric, Mac, thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks again for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please share, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform. For more content about simplifying healthcare, visit deliverhealth.com/resources, where you'll find our blog, videos, and much more. We'll see you next time on Healthcare Simplified.